Welcome to the FAQ video about the race. Here you get to know what you have to pay attention to during the race. In general, as in the qualifying, there is also a chatban in the race. The first violation will be warned, but further violations will be penalized. At the beginning of the race, the laglap will take place. This is some kind of test start where the proper function of everything is checked. After a couple of turns, the admin will restart and thereby start the real race. If you got the penalty to start from the end of the grid, this is usually the time when the admin calls you to join the grid. Please try your best to stay on the track during the laglap, so don't jump into pits or spectator mode or even leave the track, otherwise your position at the real start is lost. In general, there are no conditions for restart of the race, even not after a big crash or similar, so especially at the start you should be extra cautious. The only case when there will be a restart will be if the admin makes a major mistake affecting huge parts of the grid, for example accidentally ended the race, but this basically didn't ever happen. Of course, it's very frustrating to end your race in the very beginning after the start. For this situation there is a possibility to rejoin the race. As long as the leader of the race don't begin his third lap, you once can rejoin from the pits. If the leader is in his lap 3 or further, your race is unfortunately over and you have to retire. In some of the races there may be mandatory pit stops instructed. There are different conditions for these mandatory pit stops which are announced in the championship schedule for the corresponding race. First, of course, the number of pit stops, so how often you have to do your pit stop. Usually it's 1 or 2 times. What you do during these pit stops is down to you. Another condition could be a pit stop window, so an instructed time when to do your mandatory pit stops. Usually it's instructed with laps, for example between lap 10 and 20, where in lap 10 the earliest possible and in lap 20 the latest possible mandatory pit stop is possible. Of course you can do pit stops before and after this window, but these pit stops will not count as mandatory stops. In races with mandatory pit stops but without a pit stop window, the first and last lap are not counted for mandatory pit stops. Another condition could be an instructed pit stop time. This means the time you stand for your pit stop or the sum of those times with 2 mandatory pit stops have to be at least as long as the instructed time. For this, the time showed in the MPRES statistics is decisive. A last possible condition is a regulation what to do during your mandatory pit stop. For example, change at least 1 or all 4 tires. If you got a penalty from LFS or the admin during your race, you have to attend it within the next 3 passes of the start-finish line. So after you get a penalty, you can pass the pit entry for 2 times. If you pass it a 3rd time, your penalty will be increased. A drive-through becomes a stop-and-go penalty, which becomes a disqualification. It is for sure a fine move, but drivers who roll out, lacking fuel right before the end of the race, can only be pushed by drivers who didn't already end their race. If there's a follow-up race, stay on track until the admin ends the session and stay attentive for the grid building for the next race. After the grid is built, you can use the short break which will be announced by the admin. This was the FAQ video for the race. Now you can click on the left side to get back into the overview in the main FAQ video, or click on the right side to get to the next FAQ video about the grid qualifying and the promotion relegation system.